25 years ago, when I was about yay high, we lived next to a very lovely man called Kerry. Kerry had a fascination with his old car, but because I was only small at the time, I never really knew what that old car was. It turned out it was an Aston Martin DB6, and one day Kerry took my dad out in the car for a drive and pulled over and offered him a go. My father said to him, "Do I really want to have a go?" And he said, "No." So my father thanked him and politely declined. Now, a quarter of a century on, I'm going to find out whether he made the right choice, because I'm driving not a DB5, but instead one of its very close relatives, a DB6. This is quite a special moment, this. Before I deliver my verdict on this car, I want to make one thing absolutely, completely clear. Andrew, this car's owner, is a complete legend. Even when these cars weren't worth an awful lot of money, they didn't always get used for very many different reasons. They're expensive to run, things can go wrong with them, they suffered from corrosion, they can have engine problems, and all sorts of other things. But this car has been used. Andrew's had this for just over 30 years. He's not a man of unlimited means at all, and in his own words, he couldn't afford to buy this car at the price they command today. However, during his stewardship, he has put on some 50,000 very enjoyable miles. He's also given this car a thorough renovation. Not a restoration, a renovation. In his words, the distinction being that with a restoration, they will potentially replace things that simply don't need replacement. The renovation was simply repairing what needed to be repaired and giving the car the best care it could. This was a process that began a number of years ago and took a total of 19 months. It was pretty comprehensive, involving work to the body and the engine being quite in depth. This car now having a 4.2 litre straight six rather than the original 4 litres of capacity. That means it puts out a genuine 285 horsepower versus the claimed 280 odd that it originally had. It is rather nerve-wracking driving something that's worth the same as my house. I'm not going to tell you what it's worth, but I know exactly what it is because I've had to insure it. That being said, all the tension and nerves that I have about this are very quickly melting away, because this big old bus is actually a real sweetie. This is proper. Getting off the line takes a few more revs than you think that it might. But the gearbox, in comparison to many of the period, is actually really quite nice. Very direct. The lever feels so tiny and spindly. Throttle wonderful, and the car's actually really torquey too. Once you're on the move as well, the sheer heft of it isn't too much of a problem. Now, I'm not an Aston Martin expert. Really, anything pre-DB7, I just have no idea. I'm not an owner. I'm something of an enthusiast. I believe in the Aston Martin Owners Club. I am what they would call a muggle. As a sideline, Andrew's recently started up a little website, and the sole price for me driving his pride and joy was to give it a mention. And I was happy to agree to that when I found out that it was something you'd all be interested in. It's called Petrolheads Welcome, and it's essentially an online directory for all things car friendly. That's pubs, restaurants, meeting venues that are both accessible and welcoming to us like-minded car folk, and our two-wheel brethren as well. And three-wheelers, I suppose. Now, he did tell me that I should rev this car out, so shall we rev out a DB6, boys and girls? Shall we? should check the brakes as well, shouldn't I? Because it's quick enough. I don't believe it. They work. They actually work. Well, cover me in lard, call me Susan. I'm impressed. Old cars don't stop this well. They really don't. Now, I've actually recently spent quite a bit of time driving classic cars of this vintage, but mostly American ones, and this does genuinely feel a world apart. These were always much more expensive cars. In fact, this was considerably more expensive even than a Jaguar E-Type, a car that actually, in fairness, was known for being surprisingly cheap. But it's a joy, a real, absolute joy. I thought it was going to be a bag of old, you know, not very good. You got a great view of the bonnet, and if I'm being entirely honest, this thing is far less daunting to drive than the DB9 that I've just got out of. These side mirrors actually work. There's something that he fitted to the car. Originally, it would have had none at all. Later on in its life, it was fitted with some 1970s sort of bullet-style mirrors, you know, Ford Capri type things on the actual bonnet. But they didn't really do any good at all. So during the renovation, they came off. One other thing I want to talk about with this car, the colour of it. Everyone thinks about these cars being silver. Let's face it, that's all thanks to that well-known man of international intrigue, Mr. Bond. I think they're called silver birch, aren't they, the DB5s? And I have to be entirely honest here, because I got to. That's my thing, right? I'm honest with you all. These cars never really ever done anything for me. I know the 4, 5 and 6 are reasonably closely related, and to us muggles, they do all look the same. In actual fact, when you spend a couple of minutes looking at them, you'll see that the 6 is a very different thing to the 5. The back's got what they call the cam tail, the sort of cam back, this little short flick, which solves some of the aerodynamic issues that they have with the 5. The entire car is longer, although not by that much. That makes this a genuine 4-seater. You can really get 4 adults in this car with luggage as well. The boot is actually pretty generous, in keeping with any sort of period vehicle. Both the speedo and rev counter, not the most precise of things, but that's fine. You know exactly what's going on in this car. And if I get a speeding ticket in a DB6, I am framing it, and it is taking pride of place. Oh, there we go. That's the only time you find it's a bit unpleasant. The minute you're above sort of 80 mile an hour, apparently, steering is fine. Wheel is huge, as it always is in these old things. Oh, period radio down here looks great. Car drives so well. It's got triple SUs feeding that 4.2 litre Tadek Marek design lump, and it's remarkably well sorted. This car is absolute proof, if ever it were needed, that you don't have to choose between having a car that you drive and enjoy or a garage queen. Now, its owner's up here, and I promised I'd give him a bit of a flyby. Throttle pedal travel is really long. Turn it in, or you feel the car moving around. The front washes wide, then the rear tries to brake out, and it's all happening at fairly low speed. You aren't going to chuck this car around bends. You're just not. I would love to be able to draw comparisons with the Jaguar E-Type, but I've yet to drive one of those. However, this is a high watermark. In fairness, if the E-Type only drove as well as this, I think I'd be quite happy with it. Maybe I've done it the right way. I've come into this car with absolutely zero expectations whatsoever. I just thought it would be naff. And it's not. It's fabulous. And I promise, I'm not a fanboy of these cars. I'm really, really not. The old Aston that I like, and if I could have a go in one, if someone's got one, I'd love a crack at it. The later V8. think it's the Series 4. Anyway, the Living Daylights shape. That's what I'd like a go at. Preferably red with an X-Pack. I don't know what an X-Pack actually is, but it sounds really cool. I really want one. As you can probably tell, this car's reasonably floaty. It's soft, very soft, but it just suits it. It suits the whole thing. There is a misconception that the DB6, which was built in a slightly different way to the DB5, is a much heavier car. The truth is, there is actually very little between them. I know a lot of people would see a car like this and just assume that its owner bought it because he couldn't afford a DB5. Well, the truth is that actually he's always wanted a 6, because when he was a lad growing up, this was the Aston. Nothing wrong with that. The renovation process that he underwent has actually been very thoroughly documented in an Aston Martin owner's magazine. And he didn't do it because something broke, but he did it because he enjoyed driving the car so much, he didn't want it to let him down. So he elected to start the process probably a few years earlier than he strictly had to. But he was very lucky because there were quite a few things that could have been wrong with the car, including engine blocks, which apparently can crack. However, nothing was. I've got just over half a tank of fuel in here. I wonder how long it'll take before Andrew becomes suspicious. When I normally drive cars of this value, I want to basically do a nighttime raid. In, out, smash and grab, leave before I was even there. And the moment I hand over the keys is a joy. Genuinely, many cars, XJ220, love the experience, but handing those keys over is, in many ways, the best part of the entire thing. I don't want to give these keys back. I really don't want to. I'm having far too much fun in here. It's just... And they're off! The world's wackiest racers. Plenty of torque, easy to drive. It's controversial, but I don't think it's a pretty car. I'm sorry, I just don't. But beauty is in the eye of the key holder, and I am very envious of Andrew. He's done car ownership exactly right. He's bought it, he's loved it. Most importantly, he's used it, he's enjoyed it. And I asked him before I did this review, I never like people to tell me what they think the car drives like, because I want to deliver you my honest opinion of that. And in all fairness, it's a good driving car. The steering communicates, but it drives like a very, very well sorted 1960s car. That's the truth of it. What I asked him, I said, look, this is an opportunity to talk to the world about the DB6, a car that's almost always overlooked. I said to him, this is your chance to remedy perhaps any misconceptions or untruths you feel that have been dealt harshly upon the DB6. He said, honestly, I kind of want it to stay that way, because the best thing about it is that everybody sees it as the DB5's inferior. The truth is that it's maybe a very different car to the DB5, a more overtly GT orientated car versus the sportier 5, but it is still a wonderful thing. I can't justify the current prices of them, of course I can't, but that's not the car's fault for that. And it maybe makes it all the more special that it still gets used, driven, enjoyed, and I am eternally grateful to him for letting me have a go. One more lap, I think.